everybody, it's Mindy from My Creative Scoop, and I'm so excited to be back with another Copic tutorial for my favorite things. This month I'm going to be sharing with you how I get a smooth gradient using the flicking technique, and then we will be using that flicking technique after we practice on our blank sheet, and we're going to be using the flicking technique on our little birds here from the brand new stamp set called Tweet Holidays. So let's get started. So you're going to lay the marker down, and that's going to be its darkest point. And then when you flick going out, it's already starting to get a little bit lighter. So now you can lay down your next lighter color. So that was R59, and now I'm going to get out the R39, and we're just going to continue creating that smooth gradient. So I'm going to start back where the color first starts to fade and start pulling that R59 out. We're going to work through all of the colors. So it's going to go R59, R39, R37, R35, R32, and R30. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do the exact same thing by creating a gradient on the bird using the reds. But first I want to color the areas white that we want to be white. The reason being is I don't want to take any chances of pulling, and if I lay down the red first, I don't want to take any chances of pulling that red into the areas that I want white. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our C2, C0, and C3. I'm going to start with my C2, and we're just going to go underneath the brim of the hat, just along the bottom, and also along the bottom of the little puffy ball on his hat. And I also added a couple of little dots there for some texture. Now I'm also going to make the tummy white. So since we want this to be white, all we have to do is add a little bit of a shadow. That's going to give it the contrast that we need in order to make it look like it's white. So I'm going to take my C2 and just go all underneath the bottom of his scarf, and then down along the side of the scarf, and again underneath over here. And you want to kind of have it tapered down just so it gives it that roundness. So now I'm going to take my C0, and we want to blend this out a little bit. So this is such a small area to do the little flicks. So I'm just going to lay the marker down right next to that C2. I'm going to do the same thing. This time I'm doing a little flicks here up into the top of the hat. And then also along the bottom, I'm just going to flick going down. The C0 is light enough to where it's going to blend nicely into the white, just shadowing it. Now I'm going to take my C2 again and go along the top here, just in each of these little corners where his tummy's kind of peeking out underneath the little beak there. And then I'm going to take my C0, and I'm just going to do a couple of little flicks just to kind of blur that out, just to give it that little bit of a shadow and just to blend it out a little bit. So now we're going to add a little bit more depth to it. So I'm going to take my C3, and I'm just going to go along the bottom part again. I'm going to try to go right where I've added the C2, just not as heavy. So if you think about it more, instead of filling it in or just shadowing that area, think of it as just outlining the outline of the image. So I'm just gonna stay along the corners and right on top of that outline. And just adding that little bit of color really makes it stand out. So we're gonna do the same thing all over in all the white areas. So I'm actually just gonna kind of dot here and there along the hat. And then the same thing in the corners over here, we're just gonna kind of outline the image just in that shadowed area. And now I'm gonna do the exact same thing down here. So I'm gonna stay really close to the line of the scarf. So just outline the image just outline the outline of the stamp. And then the same thing down here and right in there. And then also I'm gonna come down here, and again, we want it to kind of just taper off. So it's not adding a whole lot, but it does add a big difference. So if you've gone a little heavy with that and you want it to blend a little bit more, skip the C2 and go straight to C0 and just give it a little flick, softening up that harsh line of the C3. And you don't have to go everywhere, just where you feel that you need it. Okay, so for the little beak, I didn't add any definition to that since it's really small. So I'm just taking my YR07 and I'm just gonna fill in the beak. So now I'm going to start with my reds, and we're going to start with the R59. We want the gradient, usually with birds, I'm kind of thinking I'm wanting this to look like a cardinal. So I want it to be darker along the top, because as you notice, if you go and you look at pictures of cardinals, they're gonna be a lot lighter along the bottom. So, and they're gonna be a little bit more darker in the face. That's how mine's gonna be anyways. So what we wanna do is just take your R59, and I'm going to kind of do the same thing where I'm just tracing along the side of the outline. But again, we wanna come down and have it taper off just to give it that roundness. So that's gonna be the darkest point. There's not really gonna be anything besides the tail, which we'll get to in a few minutes. So we want that to stay the darkest. So just like how we did with that gradient, you're gonna come down dark and you're gonna have it smooth out and get lighter. So now I'm gonna take my R39. We're gonna come just right along the side of that. So you could do little baby flicks if you want, or if you prefer to just kind of lay your marker down along the side. So not a whole lot of difference there, but it will blend nicely. It's gonna have that nice dark to light contrast. So now I'm gonna take my R37 and do the exact same thing. So I'm just gonna leave a tiny bit of white still, and now I'm gonna take my R35 and fill the rest of this area in up here along the top. And then I'm gonna start pulling this R35 down because we want it to start to get lighter. So underneath the wing, and again around the sides of the tummy, just along the edges. And the same thing over on this side. So there's just that little bit of area right there. So we're just gonna fill that in all the way, and then start to come down the sides just a little bit. So now I'm gonna take my R32 and I'm gonna pull that R35, and I'm gonna get a nice blend, and then you're gonna move over to this side and do the exact same thing until it's nice and blended out. And we want this part to stay its lightest. So now that we have a nice blend on here, we could do the one swipe over to fill in the rest. So now let's go ahead and do the wings and the tail. So I'm gonna go back with my R59, and I'm gonna go up the little feathers that are creating on the edge of the wings here. And we're gonna go a little bit back in the back part of the wing. And then also at the bottom part of the tail, I'm just gonna come up each of these sides just a little bit. Now since these areas are a lot smaller, I'm gonna skip my R39 and go straight to my R37. When you're coloring smaller images and you want that really dark to light contrast, you can always go back to the middle color if you want. So if we don't get a good blend with the R37 with the R59, we can give it a little touch of the R39. But that way you don't add that much color down. Then if you saturate your paper too much in that small little area and you don't get that depth, it's gonna start seeping out of the outline, and that's how you start to get that where you're going outside of the lines. Although I am using the Copic Express It, so I rarely have that happen unless I'm really saturating my paper. So I'm just coming out a little bit more with my R37. And the same thing with the tail. So there's just a little bit of color left. So I'm gonna take my R35 and I'm gonna really focus on those areas just right in here because I wanna try to give it a little touch with the R32 just to make it a little bit lighter in the center. So there's just a little bit of area left. So now I'm gonna take my R32 and we're just gonna fill the rest of it in. I'm not gonna go over it too much. You just wanna kind of dab the paper until there's no more white showing. That way it stays its lightest. If I were to sit here and go back and over and over and over, I'm gonna lose all that dark shadow and that dark contrast that we've just created. So with this, instead of flicking going out this way, I'm just gonna come along the back part of the area where it's still white, and I'm just gonna give it a little dab and come inwards. So that way I'm blending it backwards, blending it into that 35 rather than pushing it out. So now I'm gonna give him a little green scarf. So I'm gonna take my G85 and G82, and I'm just gonna come along the bottom of the scarf and above his little wing there, and the same thing on this side. And since we want this part of the scarf to look like it's coming out from being tucked in there, I'm just gonna give it a little bit of a shadow up here at the top, and I'm gonna taper down along the sides. And then this little piece of the scarf that's folded back, that part's gonna be shadowed more than down in here, because this part is hidden from this part that's coming up and over. So I'm just gonna come underneath and all along the side of this piece of the scarf. So I just have that little bit left. So now I'm gonna take my G82 and I'm just gonna pull that color to get a good blend. And since we're only using 2 colors, I wanna leave a white area so that way it stays its lightest. I don't wanna add layers and layers of color, so that way I have that dark to light contrast. And I'm gonna do the same thing over here, blending the G85 out. So now I'm gonna go back and repeat my G85. I wanna add a little bit more definition. Like I said before, when you add layer after layer, it ends up getting darker. So I'm just gonna do the exact same thing I did when I first laid down the G85. Just trace along the bottom, giving that deeper shadow back in there. Same thing down here and up here. So now I'm gonna take my G85, I'm gonna blend this out again. And once it's nice and blended, and then we'll do the one swipe over, filling in the rest of the scarf. All right, so let's give him a little red hat. So again, I'm gonna start with my R59 and go directly under the little white furry ball on his hat. And since there's not a whole lot of room here, we're gonna skip the R39 again and go straight to R37. So I have a very small little section there that I'm gonna just take my R35 and fill in. All right, so he is all ready to be die cut. Okay, so here are our finished cards. this is the background that we created with our Copics by practicing the flicking technique, and then we stamped it in the white. And we have a nice gradient. I also die cut it with the new Joy die cut from My Favorite Things, and then I took the Joy and I created two different cards, but they're very, very similar, and it's all with using the background that we created with practicing our Copic, our blending. So I hope you enjoyed this month's tutorial. I will see you again next month.